Welcome to science class. Today we are going to take a look at what living things are made of. Let's just begin right away with the reductionist existential crisis type of information. Your body is a collection of atoms and molecules. The carbon in your body is chemically identical in every way to the carbon locked within some random rock or mineral. None of those atoms or molecules is alive, but they make up you, and you are alive. What's the difference? Well, you can argue that there almost isn't one. A cell is just an enclosed capsule where billions of chemical reactions take place, breaking down and building up and exchanging material. You happen to be made of many cells. You have the potential to pass on one of those cells, fuse it with another individual cells, and that creates the first cell of a new life. That individual cell clearly isn't conscious. It has no idea it exists. But you clearly know that you exist. When did that happen? When you were 1,000,000 cells big? 1,000,000,000? 1,000,000,000,000? Nobody knows. Do unicellular organisms understand that they exist? There's no way. But they're alive, right? Does an earthworm know that it exists? A dog definitely does. An earthworm is a multicellular animal, just like a dog, but maybe it has no concept of awareness. Maybe it's just a biological robot. Maybe I'm just a biological robot. Okay, sorry, I actually got way ahead of where we are going today. We are just going to be peeking at the atomic and molecular basics of life. Those are our building blocks and sources of energy, after all. Let's get started. We're going to start with atoms. Now, I'm not going to be teaching you about the structure or property of atoms or how atoms form bonds. I'm going to assume you know that. Even with just a very basic understanding of that, you should make it through this video no problem. 96% of your body, or any living organism, is made of just 4 elements: oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. That's it. Seems too simple to be true, but these elements can combine in any number of ways to form countless molecules. This molecule is adenine, part of your DNA. If I just add one oxygen atom to it and rearrange the structure a little bit, I get guanine, a totally different molecule. It goes back to our Lego brick example. I could take apart a Lego house and, using the exact same bricks, no more, no less, construct anything I want to out of those Legos. Atoms are just raw materials. They can turn into anything. Now, carbon is the most essential element by far. Oxygen is the most abundant element in your body by a long ways. But carbon is the most versatile. If you look at this molecule again, you'll notice that carbon forms the scaffolding, the backbone of it. Carbon can form 4 covalent bonds, meaning that it can build in any direction and orientation, and the chains it makes up can stretch to tremendous lengths. Molecules that contain carbon are called organic molecules. But organic can also mean derived from living things. There are important inorganic compounds: water, electrolytes, oxygen, carbon dioxide, vitamins, and minerals. But our bodies are built from compounds containing carbon. Remember, inorganic can also mean not from a living thing, so CO2 fits the definition even though it has carbon in it. In humans, the next most abundant elements are calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, and sulfur. And there are extremely tiny amounts of several other elements in your body too. They're in such tiny quantities that you might think that they are almost like impurities. If you could suddenly get rid of them, nothing would happen. But no, you would die pretty quickly. Our bodies don't really use individual atoms except in very few select examples. Electrolytes, such as potassium, calcium, and sodium, are used for cell-to-cell communication, particularly in your muscles and nervous system. But besides that, Atoms combine to form molecules, and those molecules are the real stuff of life. The inorganic compounds we went over earlier, those are small, simple, and only used for chemical reactions in our body. Our bodies are not made of them. Water obviously makes up 60 to 70% of the living matter of a thing, but water is contained within your cells, so it's not really a structural component. All of the chemical reactions in our cells require the presence of water. Water is a great solvent. It has a high heat capacity. It keeps temperatures stable. There are massive benefits that water provides. But when we talk about the stuff of life, we focus mainly on what are called macromolecules, which means huge molecules. The primary macromolecules are proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids, and we will be going over each of those. A macromolecule is made of smaller molecules linked together. Those individual subunits are called monomers. A string of monomers makes a polymer. So as we go through proteins, carbs, lipids, and nucleic acids, we will also be discussing what their building blocks are. First up are the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms, usually in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio, CH2O, literally carbon then water, hence the name. The primary function of carbohydrates is for energy. We talk about burning carbs or carbo-loading before a race. The source for these carbohydrates can vary, but all living things metabolize carbohydrates, break them down, oxidize them, and extract energy from them. Plants can store excess carbs in the form of starch. Animals don't store very much carbohydrate, but it is in our muscle tissue in the form of glycogen. Glycogen and starch would be polymers, which with carbohydrates we specifically call polysaccharides. Simpler carbs, which we usually call sugars, are called monosaccharides. Glucose, fructose, galactose, these are simple monosaccharides. Between polysaccharides and monosaccharides are disaccharides, two monosaccharides linked together. Sucrose, lactose, and maltose are examples of these. Carbs can have other functions in living things as well. In plants, a carbohydrate called cellulose serves as the primary structural molecule. The stalk of a flower, the wood of a tree's trunk, the stringy fibrousness of a piece of celery, that's built from cellulose. In animals, there's a structural carb called chitin, and this is only used by certain invertebrates. The exoskeletons of arthropods, insects, and crustaceans is composed of chitin, as well as the beak and radula, which is sort of like a tongue, of mollusks. Fungi, which are more closely related to animals than to plants, also have a cell wall, but made of chitin, not cellulose. Lipids are made almost entirely of just carbon and hydrogen. Lipids are not soluble in water, which makes them particularly useful in certain applications. Lipids make up our cell membranes, which is why a cell can exist in an environment totally surrounded by water, but not dissolve. Lipids are also used to store energy. Those kinds of lipids we usually call fats. Oils that living things secrete are also lipids. Our skin secretes oil to help keep us waterproof. Capsaicin, the compound that makes peppers hot, is an oil. Waxes are another type of lipid. Succulent plants that live in dry climates make good use of waxes to retain their moisture. The other really important group of lipids are hormones. Hormones are the way that our cells communicate with each other, and they have a huge number of functions and applications. Most lipids are composed of two basic monomers, fatty acids and glycerol. When a glycerol chain is completely composed of single bonds, we call it a saturated fat. When a glycerol chain contains at least one double bond, we call it unsaturated. Nucleic acids are the largest macromolecules, and it's not even close. Nucleic acids contain hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and phosphorus. Of course, DNA is a nucleic acid. DNA transmits genetic information. A gene is really a segment of your DNA. Part of your DNA is copied into its sister molecule RNA. RNA fragments are much smaller and they carry the instructions to build proteins. But ultimately, DNA contains the code for all of that. The monomers of nucleic acids are called nucleotides, and there are 5 of them. Adenine, guanine, and cytosine are found both in RNA and DNA, while thymine is unique to DNA and uracil is unique to RNA. There's one other much smaller nucleic acid, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. If we look at it and compare it to adenine, we can see that they're the same molecule, just ATP has a couple extra phosphate structures at the end. Much the way all life on the planet utilizes DNA, made of the exact same building blocks, all life on Earth uses ATP. It's used for energy. It's the universal energy molecule. ATP does the actual work associated with the activities of cells. Carbohydrates are used to make ATP. Finally, there are proteins. Proteins contain nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and many contain sulfur as well. Proteins are the most diverse group of macromolecules. If you subtract all the water from your body, about 50% of what remains is just proteins. They come in thousands of varieties, and each has a different function. Primarily, they serve as chemical messengers, commanding the chemical activity of cells. That's really vague, but that's kind of the point. Proteins are just so incredibly diverse. It's impossible to really start getting into proteins without going down a massive rabbit hole. The monomers of proteins are the amino acids. There are 20 total amino acids. These molecules will build a chain of themselves, guided by RNA, to build a protein. Proteins end up with these highly abstract, convoluted structures, but hidden within that structure is its function. It looks like a mess to us, but a hemoglobin protein has to be shaped exactly like this or it won't work. You've maybe heard of essential amino acids before. What does that mean? We'll go backwards here for a second. Your body cannot make carbs. You have to eat them. Plants, however, make their own carbohydrates, which they then metabolize. So animals eat plants or other animals to find carbohydrates. Of the 20 amino acids, humans can make 11 of them from the random building blocks of matter that makes up the food we eat. 9 of the remaining amino acids we have to get from our diet. We cannot build them inside of our cells. Those 9 are the essential amino acids. Plants, those lucky things, can make every single amino acid. So once again, we derive the ones we need from eating plants or animals. Next time, we are going to go big picture biology and start taking a look at ecology, how organisms fit into and interact with their environment. Thanks for watching.